everyone, welcome to another Overrated Film Saturday. Apologize that this video is to be uploaded late. I've been rather busy this weekend, but now I have the time to go through and get caught up today. So I'll be making Sunday's video today as well. So without further ado, let me address a film that I think has been one of those films where I feel like it's kind of overstayed its welcome for its popularity. It's just one of those films where I go, okay, it's all right, but I don't think sequels to it, which it did get, were necessary, and I don't think significantly praising this one in particular really is. I just don't think it's worthy of all of its praise. And that film's The Hangover. Yes, let's talk about The Hangover. Basically, the reason why I feel The Hangover got very popular when it came out is that it had that kind of raunchiness to it that I think a lot of people were, I guess, sort of looking for. And they wanted it sort of in that buddy comedy format, and they wanted it to revolve around drunkenness and, just all-out stupidity. So that's why, and partying. And they thought it would be funny to see a bunch of older dudes trying to do that, apparently. And also, this film centers around them sort of not remembering ultimately what happened and then trying to figure out the events, which I don't think is anything new. I think other films have done this kind of a concept before, maybe just not in the same way that The Hangover did, but I didn't feel like that made the film somehow unique because wow, they have to figure out what happened. They have to put the puzzle pieces together. It's like, yeah, there's been other films that have done that too, but I think the reason why not only did I think it become popular because of its raunchiness and because of the fact that it was trying to kind of insert a bunch of dudes, doing the buddy dumb thing. It was also because we had these sort of new and upcoming people that ultimately became popular. For example, Bradley Cooper, Zach Galifianakis, another rising sort of star, so to speak. So, again, it's not that I completely dislike this film. I think there are some funny moments, especially when they do sometimes have ridiculousness involved, like, a tiger, just somehow showing up into the hotel suite. I mean, those kinds of bits of ridiculousness I think work because they're just kind of very out of the box, and I think comedy can work that way if you think a little bit outside the box. And that I think genuinely makes it funny for me. But usually the problem I have with mostly of what's within The Hangovers is just mostly just centers around preaching to that raunchiness and, oh, look at how funny, he has a tattoo on because he was too drunk to remember. And again, it's not as outlandishly ridiculous as a tiger, it's just kind of like, oh, he must have done something stupid. It just panders to that kind of, it just panders this like really dumb, I just think it panders sometimes with its humor to the dumb crowd of people who constantly want to get drunk and hammered out of their minds. I think that's largely what The Hangover was designed for, so considering that it's called The Hangover. So yeah, I think that's just one thing that I noticed and that I felt really was kind of draining the amount of comedy that could come out of such a wacky scenario. Instead, we just get the basic, pandering to the audience rather than actually trying to make something genuinely funny out of it. Because there are some kind of ridiculous moments where they go there and try to be out of the box, so to speak. But then there's just other times where it's just complete and utter just going into that territory of, yep, we're going to pander to our audience now because our audience is a bunch of older men who still want to go get drunk and act like they're in their 20s when they're in their 40s. You know, it's just it's just ridiculous, and I find it completely it's just very unreasonable to laugh at, because on the one hand you feel sorry for these dudes that they feel like that they need to go back, you know, to being young in order to have some kind of self-fulfillment. And then, you know, it's you still don't really, again, sympathize with them all that much, because a lot of the things that they do are just very they're just they're almost to the point of where you don't really they're just not as likable characters, I felt. It wasn't like in other comedies where I felt like the characters at least had some genuineness to them. These characters I thought were kind of on the borderlines insane, especially if they were getting that hammered. And it gets only worse from once we head into Hangover sequelville, where they made 3 movies out of this one concept that pretty much do the exact same thing by having the same kind of humor and then the same kind of raunchiness, only up-leveled, and then the plot is pretty much the same. Oh, we get drunk and then we don't know what ends up happening. And the thing with too is that these characters do kind of almost insane things, like to the point where it's, you know, you can't really you almost go, wow, okay, this made this plot a lot more needlessly complicated. Like you'll see at one point what Zach Galifianakis' character ends up doing, and you just go, you know, I mean, there's just tons of dumb stuff that ends up happening in this movie that kind of ends up making it drag even more than what it should be. And then I think that just leaves an unsatisfying feeling for the audience members. I think if they cut the film down, it would have been a whole lot better. Yeah, there are some genuinely ridiculously funny moments. Yeah, I think the thing with the tiger, I think it's so ridiculous that it stands out, because, you know, you wouldn't expect that to happen if you got drunk. With a tattoo, you would expect that to happen. But with something like a tiger, you wouldn't expect it. So that's why I felt like it was funny in that sense. But again, you know, or like with the baby, you know, usually you wouldn't expect a baby out of being drunk. You know, combining ridiculous things I think would have suited this story better. But there's just too much of pandering to, we gotta insert joke here, we gotta insert joke there, we need to make fun of you know, this, and we need to pander to this, and, you know, we constantly need to cuss and swear so that we're funny. And it's like, no, you don't, movie. You don't need to do that. You can do it once in a while, but you don't need to do that. And a lot of it is really based within cheap laughs. I mean, comedies, at least the ones that try, don't really resort to automatic cheap laughs. But this film does really try to pander to the getting people to have cheap laughs. Again, like with things like the tattoo, you know, the when the one guy gets his tooth cut out, it's just like, oh, okay, oh, I didn't really want to see that, but all right. And some people might be mad at the fact that Mike Tyson was in the movie, and since Mike Tyson has like a bad history, a bad rap, that somehow bad. I didn't think he was, I don't think he saved the movie, but I mean, the parts where he was in it I thought were actually funny because it involved his tiger, because that actually made, that was so ridiculous, but it kind of makes sense because somebody like Mike Tyson you probably would expect would have something like that. So again, it's a ridiculous scenario, but it works because it's ridiculous. If you want to go for that kind of a raunchy comedy, you need to make certain scenarios ridiculous. And they don't need to be crude. And see, that's the thing, too. I think a lot of the times, majority of The Hangover was just trying to be crude for the sake of being crude. And instead of trying to do something ridiculous and goofy and, something different. So I think that was a huge setback for me from enjoying the film. Um, and I also think this film got really overhyped because eventually I think we started seeing more films like this. Again, like Bridesmaids, sort of the female version of The Hangover. Like other raunchy comedies. And I think this is when, I think comedies that involved actors maybe like Seth Rogen, it was sort of generating that sort of trend, the Hangover in particular. So I think it did get recognized not only just by pumping out sequels, but by influencing other films that eventually would end up getting made, and pretty much telling pretty much the same standard kind of jokes. And I think really that's the biggest issues that I think really are a detriment to The Hangover is just the fact that its characters aren't as likable. Its story has been sort of done before, and it doesn't play up its ridiculousness, and instead just kind of panders to giving just kind of the standard, raunchy jokes, instead of going for the ridiculous humor that it could gone with, and it could have utilized more, and then it would have been, I think, a whole lot funnier. So yeah, I think that's really ultimately my biggest issues that I really had with The Hangover. And again, I'm not really picky about raunchy comedies. I mean, I know what they are, but I felt like The Hangover, when everybody started talking about this movie and thinking that it was the greatest thing, I just thought it was okay. I mean, it wasn't anything spectacular, but nothing really horrible. I don't think it bothered me as much as some other films that I've reviewed that are in my overrated category, but I do feel it is worthy of this category because there's just too much pandering. There's just too much. I need to insert this joke in here because the demographic is gonna laugh. And I think a film should not try to pander to an audience. I think it should try to be a little bit smarter and at the same time be ridiculous. And it can be raunchy at the same time. So that's just kind of my thoughts when it comes to The Hangover. And yeah, there's a lot of things that happen within this film that, yes, they're not the best kind of humor, but at the same time, I still think some of it could work, especially with adding in ridiculousness. But the more they try to go for the standard jokes that I think you can see pretty much time and time again and see from a mile away, then it just doesn't rub off as well. So at least for me. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about The Hangover. And again, obviously the first film is not is definitely not as bad as the sequels. I will say that. The first film at least had some legitimacy to exist. I just think the first one got way too overhyped, and as a result, we did get sequels and we did get other films that tried to pander to the raunchiness of these kinds of comedies. Unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't work when, again, you insert pretty much jokes that everybody already has heard, or they're jokes that are similar and don't really work, and they're just trying to be means for the audience to laugh as opposed to creating something smart. Again, it's great if you want a cheap laugh, you know, that's the Hangover for you. But I don't think it's anything spectacular. But for some reason, a lot of people seemed to be really into this film. It didn't grab me as much as some other people, but it was funny. I just don't think it was that funny. And I think a lot of it has to do with the pandering, and I think a lot of it has to do with the characters. They're just not as likable. They're just not as fun to watch, at least for me. And I thought a lot of the time their problems were by their own stupidity. And again, you know, just because you have a concept of people getting drunk doesn't make it funny. So, yeah. But fun once in a while, but definitely not a standout for me. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.